Everybody to ProShips Pros Who Know 2024. Let's go ahead and let's talk about the panel here as well. With me today, I've got Alex Alexander, the Nod, and I've got Robert. Okay, Alex, could you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Alex Alexander. I have 20 years of experience in the logistics technology industry. I started back with Neopost Quadient and then moved on to Indicia and Octane. And most recently, I've gone independent, helping small companies and established companies, with their carrier mix, with their channels, and with their partnerships. And I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Excellent. Thanks, Alex. Nanad, could you go ahead and, for anybody who doesn't know you, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Nanad Acharya, one of the co-founders and CEO here at Fulfillment IQ. Just short description. 20 years in the supply chain space, approximately 20 years for people that might know me from back in the days. Fulfillment IQ is, first of all, a research organization around supply chain, consulting organization around supply chain, and then a systems integrator doing both implementation and software development activities in the supply chain space. So glad to be here. Looking forward to this conversation.
Excellent, excellent. And Robert, could you introduce yourself?
Yes, Robert Pursuit from ShipMatrix. I'm celebrating my 40th year in the industry on November. I started in a trailer in 1984 in Columbus, Ohio, loading trucks for UPS. I spent 16 years in operation, UPS, RPS, now FedEx Ground. Did some RPS Air on that product. I worked for the Priority Mail processing contract for Emery Worldwide Airlines. But the last 24, most important to this call, is my work at ShipMatrix. I've spent 24 years, started up with the company, and we've grown to ever since, and working with shippers of all sizes, and it's going to be an interesting call here today.
Excellent, thank you. And many of you know me, I'm Justin Kramer. I'm one of the co-founders of ProShip. That means I've been in this industry for 24 years. I've had the privilege of working on small parcel shipment execution software, as well as some LTL software that some of it has crossed 3 continents. Some of it has hit 3 million shipments a day for our very high volume customers. And of course, just hundreds upon hundreds of customers who are just normal size, that 5 to 10,000 between regular shipping and peak shipping. And I'm just really happy that I've had the ability to go through all of that. What we're going to be talking about today, I think it's pretty important that we set the table here. First, we're going to go through some latest parcel trends and techniques, and a little bit about the market. We'll talk about managing the carrier curveballs because I think the word's been overused a little bit, but we are looking at a very volatile carrier market at this point in time. The panel will go through a couple of case studies. We'll get their expert predictions for the future before they each give their final advice, and we go ahead and we hit anything, any questions that you guys have asked that we haven't already answered in line. Again, I encourage you all to ask some questions. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and let's look at our latest trends. There's a lot going on. Clearly, we've got GRIs and a lot of other things. Robert, let's go ahead and start with you and talk about where we are with this e-commerce growth and decline.
Yeah, so e-commerce was a little bit sluggish in the beginning of the year. There is some concern about the consumer, but we're not seeing that's a long-term effect. UPS is anticipating 65% of all their shipments in Q4 will be B2C. And there's additional things coming online with Walmart, with Go Local, and there's some other things we'll talk about a little bit later. But the e-commerce is not slowing down. The consumer seems to be very resilient, and we just see that it'll continue to grow as it has in the past.
Was I on mute? Sorry. And
Yeah.
sorry, Nanad, there's a whole lot of things going on internationally and globally. Could you chime in on that?
Yeah, so I mean, there is so much going on. For people that look at the industry, it's fairly exciting. For people that have to do actual supply chain planning, should be definitely be looking at it very keenly in the market on things that are happening. First, I'll start with definitely the geopolitical trends, right? There is challenges on that front, as everyone's kind of aware. We got multiple wars open at this point with some major supply routes, especially because of some of the challenges, shipments actually going around the other side of the globe to get to us, which is putting cost pressures on, the cost of goods themselves getting to us to start with. There is some nervousness. We are, 10 days away or 8 days, 9 days away from the US election. There is some jitters in the market on what's going to end up happening on the other side. Again, no opinions on that front, but I mean, either or, there is definitely going to be some impacts. And I think there is both the consumer as well as the retailers and brands are kind of watching the impacts of that, because it's right before peak, and how people end up reacting to that front. And I think one of the bigger pressures, I would say, is the kind of growth in, Shein and Temu, and I'll kind of like name the two. When we talk about global as well as impact on US or North American kind of consumer market and the impact to the retailers, and doesn't matter if you're a retailer, if you're a brand, the impacts that it is causing, both on the supply chain side as well as on the side of how the consumer's buying pattern happens to be and the expectations that are getting set. So quite an interesting time right now. Of course, there is tons of other things that we can talk about specifically around AI, but I'll leave that to as we discuss some of the other deeper subjects.
Yeah, before we go to AI, Alex, when we were prepping for this, you had just gone to a meeting where the de minimis was discussed. First, can you explain to our audience what is de minimis? And two, can you talk about what you heard there?
Yeah, absolutely. So de minimis is the rate that a country sets where import taxes are triggered at a particular value on a shipment. So it used to be $200 in the US, and then a few years back, we increased that up to $800. And just to give kind of everybody an idea, Australia has a very high de minimis, whereas Europe has a very low de minimis. And right now there is talk about increasing that de minimis. Will that really affect things? It's really we'll wait and see. But what it does affect is the aggregators and the consolidators and the big shippers out of Asia. This was a particular event in Hong Kong, are thinking about it, and they are making changes. So that's really the effect, is that whether the actual de minimis change will take effect, or if it will actually affect things, these guys are already making changes. And then that's really, it's sort of, by the rumor, it's like, okay, well, the rumor's there, we're going to start making changes, we're not going to wait on it. So that will be interesting to see how that all plays out, and what actually ends up happening with our de minimis, and if we do go the way that Europe has gone, or stay where we are, or go to the other extreme.
Excellent. Go ahead, Anand.
I think on the de minimis side, I think it's also, again, this is really front and center for all of us when we talk about e-commerce, right? And, specifically around the 3-to-1 abuse, right? Like, so there is the de minimis, then there is the 3-to-1 abuse that ends up happening around that, right? Or I call it the abuse, because some people like to refer to it as abuse. Is it or is it not? There's a separate subject altogether. But the numbers, if you were to look at them, the utilization from an e-commerce overall freight shipment into the United States for the under de minimis is only about 3 or 4% of total trade. I mean, it's significant, but it's not that large a number, right? Of course, we all that live within that universe, that's it's 100% for us, and then you start looking at the number and go, okay, how does this impact the overall cost on the shipping side of the universe, right? It's going to be interesting. I just want to call that out. Who wins? Election will have an impact on this. This is the one thing that I will call out, right? Like, is it a stop on certain retailers and say you can't, or is it a separate option to say de minimis pull down to 200, put more regulations on 321, putting cost pressures on actually utilizing 321, right? Like, so there is a mix of things that could end up happening. Really interesting times to watch this stuff. Very well said, Alex.
Then let's stay with you and go to one of your favorite subjects, which is emerging technologies. Could you talk about what you see, not only in the act of emerging, but what you see emerging over the next year?
I think I want to use a statement like, stop planning for 5 years at this point, plan for 6 months right now, because the pace at which we are seeing technology evolve on the AI front is absolutely mental. That's the best way I can describe it. This is not another fad. It's not another trend. This is significant shift in the way of doing business in general is what we are observing. And the adoption. So, I went to a conference, Shop Talk, in March, and then Shop Talk had another conference in October. The difference between the products and service offering between March and October is so drastically different at this point, with AI adoption pretty much built into almost every solution, and every conversation from every brand was focused around AI to say, okay, how do I rationalize how it works for me? So I think everyone's starting to think, and whoever is not, should really start worrying and start thinking about how do you kind of adopt it. It's in their core business, to their supply chains, to their planning, to execution, to the resourcing. It impacts every single piece of your business, and you should be thinking about it.
Interesting. If businesses are going to be thinking a lot about updating to products with a lot of AI in them, employees need to be prepared to be flexible as well, so they can keep up as well. Alex, let's go back to you here, and let's talk about, basically best practices and strategies. How do we stay ahead right now?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Tying into what Anand just said about AI, when we looked at our ProShift survey, almost half of the respondents said that one of their focuses is technology, right? But of those, only 21% said their focus is on AI. And what they don't understand is every technology you touch going focus will have AI in it. So obviously technology becomes a huge factor, and carrier mix. No longer is limiting your carriers to where your best contract sits is a best practice. You really have to look at, do you have the right carriers? Not just implementing carriers for the sake of implementing carriers, but carriers that help your customer satisfaction. That's going to be really big. And then, of course, we could get into this, the data side of things, and the performance of carriers is going to be really important.
Excellent.
Just to quickly touch on that, I just do want to kind of highlight on that front, utilization of AI and personalization in general, right? So what is, when it comes to parcel, like what can people be thinking about? It's rather than doing generalization around consumer profiles and say, I am going to offer up a certain type of shipping in a broader range, be like, if you're located here, this is the type of shipping that I offer. It's going to get down to very individualized personalization, depending on who the consumer happens to be and what the value of the consumer happens to be, and making a decision real time to saying, what will close the deal with this customer to optimize my parcel shipping? So that upstream decision making will have, AI is going to have a lot to say on that front going forward.
Interesting. I could see how that could work, and how and I can also see where an OMS could specialize in that, or maybe you could have a little bit of that in a warehouse management solution or something of that nature. But let's face it, AI is going to be a conversation for the next decade, and if you're not in it, Well, there used to be buggy whip manufacturers. Let's just leave it at that. So,
Yeah.
all right. Managing carrier curveballs. Ever since the pandemic started, we've really noticed that there's been a lot of volatility in this world. Robert, I'm going to go back to you. Can you talk about some of the challenges of dealing with rate changes, fuel surcharge, fuel costs? Can you start us off there?
Absolutely. I would just say, Justin, the biggest curveball I've seen in all my years in the industry just came out in July. UPS and FedEx both had a volume-based peak surcharge, and they've had it for several years to accommodate for additional workforce, et cetera, that they have to hire during the Christmas season that aren't quite as productive as their other workforce. But they introduced a brand new charge, a per package charge, just as a demand surcharge for every package that's going to a residential address. So SurePost and all the air services residential, FedEx home delivery, FedEx Smart Post, et cetera. I'm sorry, FedEx ground economy, I should say. But the outtake of it is that the charge for a package during the peak season, and they have 3 different periods. This one's from November to Christmas. You can be paying $3.15 more per package just for a FedEx ground economy package. And if you ship on an express package, you can paying $8.25 more. So this really just hit shippers unaware. They're coming right in the peak season. It's a huge curveball. What do you do? And if you're single sourced, and there was talk before, you're going to take a 27% hit on your cost per package. If you have the ability to manifest multiple carriers, you might be able to mitigate that down to 4%. You're going to take a hit because you can't completely eliminate it. But this has just been another example of the charges that have come about are fast and furious this year. It used to be 1 GRI a year. Now you've got a demand surcharge on top of a peak surcharge. So shippers got to be agile, and they got to be keeping their ear to the ground and making sure they understand all the charges that are coming their way, and to have the ability to be flexible. That's a key area right now that we're seeing. Be able to react when the carriers do things.
And that really goes back to something both the other panelists have mentioned. Alex has mentioned that you really can't have the single carrier solution anymore and actually turn a profit, right? Nanad's comment just a second ago, where am I worth it because I order every month continuously? Is it worth it to pay that extra for me, or do you want to go ahead and downgrade to a service that will keep me satisfied but not delighted? Very interesting. Robert, you got more to share with us?
Yeah, so to that point, there's 2 areas where, and I'll just follow up on what Alex said, you're not adding carriers just to add carriers. You're adding carriers that make sense. And not only make sense to the shipper, but also to the carrier itself. So we just did an analysis of a shipper that was using a 3PL, and they were trying to use a low-cost product. So they were using UPS SurePost. Well, they were shipping everything UPS SurePost. And they were shipping anything that was 10 pounds and over, also UPS SurePost. But UPS would rather have that go into the UPS ground residential network. And so you're trying to match what their pricing is. They're telling you where they want the volume. And in this case, just moving packages from 10 pounds and over to UPS SurePost on a $1.4 million spend saves $600,000 because the carrier was pricing it such to try to tell them, we don't want that coming through SurePost. And I will say the same thing. We just talked about the FedEx ground economy, $3.15 per package surcharge during November. They're telling you, okay, we don't want to overload our network. Please find another option. And we've had a customer that said, okay, we get the message, and they moved everything they had everything under 1 pound going DHL e-commerce. They moved everything 2 pounds to DHL e-commerce. In 1 week, they saved $10,000. And again, it's making sure that you're aligning yourself, not just to add carriers to add them, but to add the right carriers and making sure the carriers are getting the business they want.
Yeah, and you know what? It doesn't surprise me. It's odd when we are like, why do we keep talking so much about rate shopping? Everybody's got to be rate shopping. And Robert, you just gave a perfect example where a retailer has a great idea, but without actually running it through good software, they're not actually getting the best of the best. But Alex, let's shift over to you here and let's talk about some strategies for managing carrier relationships and negotiating favorable terms. I've always looked at the GRI and these increases in surcharges as a starting point for negotiation. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, well, number one is understanding your package mix and understanding how those surcharges affect your business. So, for example, you might have a 5% surcharge, right? But if you don't know what your package mix is, you really don't know how that affects your business. So I've done recent study for a client, and we 5% increase for them actually was about between 12 and 22% increase. Now you have to sit there and look at your margins and say, well, okay, can I afford this particular increase, and how do I manage that? Now, I mean, if we look at, for example, USPS with their Ground Advantage product, a very successful product, it's seeing a tremendous amount of increase in volume, something crazy, over 300% on their over 1 pound rates, and then, quarter over quarter growth of over, 20, 30%. So really it's having the tools to be able to take those surcharges, those rates, your contracted rates, and figuring out how to divide up your volume amongst the carriers to, number one, keep your customers satisfied, because that's without the customers, your business doesn't run, and then managing your costs. So it's not just saying, oh, okay, you're going to increase my rate at 10%. You're not going to negotiate with me. I'm dropping you. That's not a solution. The solution is, okay, how do I create the proper mix so that I manage this increase properly and be able to add in carriers that help to maintain my costs?
And Alex, we've got a question that just came in that looks like it's going to be perfect for this spot right here. Anna from Glidewell says, has anyone been able to get rid of the demand surcharges with UPS or FedEx?
I personally am not aware of anyone. But what I would say to Dan, it's how do we, Anna, it's really how to, add the carriers to minimize the effects of those demand surcharges, right? So, for example, if you can't exceed a certain volume number, well, you don't wait till you hit that volume number before you start thinking about other carriers. What you do is throughout the day is that you're moving packages to different carriers that make the most sense. So really, technology is the key to that. The way you're going to negotiate that is by having the tools in place that maximize your savings.
Yeah, and from the ProShip side, our experience has been nobody's been able to get rid of it. Some customers have been able to delay it by a year or two. But if you've already got it, your best bet is to negotiate and leverage alternative carriers, because the carriers will price themselves out, as Robert was mentioning before. They will price themselves out of packages they don't want. All right, Nanad, let's go to you. How do we mitigate the impact of unexpected events such as disruptions and delays? We were just as we were talking at the very beginning here, talking about the first snows starting to fall, and if it becomes a snowy Q4, that's of course going to affect the actual delivery times.
Well, that definitely starts with, I'll say, having the visibility to even know that things are going to be delayed, right? Like, I think that is the most important front, first of all, is having the right amount of data. and disruptions are going to come from all directions, right? Like there is just general network pressures that could evolve. I think this year we started the call, the session saying that it's gonna be okay, right? Like we are not gonna have that much volume pressure per se, but if there was, having communication, so data is not just your data, it's making sure that your account managers, your vendor relationships, you are getting the real-time visibility even at a human level in communication over the phone, saying that, hey, there is a problem. Second, definitely data, having the right software, right technology, right tool, let's say ProShip, to be able to say, if things are going to be delayed, if I'm not going to meet my customer commitment, as an example, and being able to first know about it. The second, I would say, is communication. Communicate early, communicate often, whatever commitment you make on that communication. Customers will be forgiving, but not very forgiving. So if you are going to communicate, then let's be very clear about the reasons why things are delayed and when they can expect it, especially during peak season, having impacts around, when they are going to go see grandma and grandpa and a gift not arriving at that time, as an example, is a really frustrating experience to a point that you could actually end up losing. And then give your customer choices rather than just pure communications, to be able to go back and say, hey, I want to reroute it to grandma and grandpa's house, as an example. Is there an option? Is there an availability to be able to do something of that nature? So being open and communicative, that retention cost on the long-term value of that customer is super important. So it is very personalized as well. And so making sure that you have these things in place for yourself. On the other side, on the disruption front, I'll also call out diversification in your supply. Right? Like, so if you are sourcing your products from elsewhere, I think everyone's talking about nearshoring, inshoring. I don't know so much about inshoring at this point, but definitely look into nearshoring, and also have, if you are, a single source supplier, looking at a China plus one or Asia X strategy that you can deploy to ensure that there is, that disruption is mitigated from your perspective. That could be on the products that you actually acquire from your standpoint. And yeah, I'll circle back right into technology, just making sure that you have the right technology in place in your operations, in your planning, in your execution. Also, resource mitigation. And technology can help you do that if you have good planning and forecasting, because yeah, the amount of times we have seen that the facilities are built to peak, but they are unable to execute to peak, is because of the labor shortages that can end up happening. So having that diversification on how you end up acquiring that actual labor that's got to do the pick, pack, and ship operation is also something that's mitigated. So here are some high-level lists for you.
Excellent, excellent. All right, let's keep moving along. We're just a few minutes behind schedule. Let's jump into case studies. And Alex, let's go ahead and let's start with you. Tell us the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Well, for case studies, let me just go back to one of the sessions we had yesterday with Backcountry, where, they have on their website, they promise delivery in 3 to 5 days. But the gentleman from Backcountry said, he goes, but I know 40% of my deliveries or of my shipments are delivered in 1 to 2 days. But he doesn't have a way of knowing which of those deliveries are going to show up in 1 to 2 days. And number two, he doesn't know how to communicate that to the customer. So, one of the things where technology really comes into play, and this is where AI will really come into play, is that, you could determine those at the shopping cart level and be able to communicate to the customer as they're looking at the product and let them know ahead of time, hey, you will be able to receive this product. Let's say today is a Tuesday. You'll be able to have that by Thursday, because, Backcountry doing a lot of outdoor stuff, you might need your stuff by the weekend. If it's not going to get here by Thursday or Friday, I might not place that order. So really being able to implement, technologies and not implementing them in 2 years or 3 years, implement them now. Because at the end of the day, the sooner you don't want to be the last guy to be implementing.
Agreed. Agreed. Awesome. All right, Nanad, what's your good, bad, ugly case study?
I'll just start with, from a case study standpoint, is the impact of the last 100 feet, right? Like the last 100 feet inside the warehouse, specifically, and the automation that goes along with it. I think one of the key innovators in that space, let's take as an example, has been Amazon, or what they call the slam line. The slam line meaning that print and apply line that actually looks at the packages going through and the optimization of what label to actually generate and print, connected to a capability like ProShip as an example, to be able to say, hey, it's this label, it needs to print in this way, and it needs to go out with a given carrier. And it's, rather than making your carrier decision really upfront when the order arrives or all the way up at when the order was actually placed, just by moving that carrier decision making to the last 100 feet when the box is already cartonized and it's ready to ship out, and saying, okay, now I know which trailer, Gaylord, pickup carrier that it's going to actually make it into, making that decision at the tail end. And Amazon's seen, it has been that, forefront of technology when it comes to that level of capability. Of course, Amazon's done quite a lot. We could talk about supply chain planning and optimization and all of that. But particularly when it comes to multi-carrier shipping, it's that systemically making a really good decision at the last point you can to optimize your supply chain and to optimize your carrier rates and pricing while meeting your customer commitments, but also making sure that you are bringing in the right type of hardware to be able to do that. So it's a technology from a soft tech standpoint or software and the hardware if you have the volumes. And what I'll say about the volumes is a lot of people think automation is expensive, but in a lot of cases where, in my personal anecdotes, where we walk into a location where they say, oh, I only have 3,000 packages a day, automation seems expensive. Here's a upfront capital investment that's going into it. But if you just look at your pure ROI on it, and if you feel confident about your business, you could be on that particular function, have an ROI, return on investment showing, within year and a half, 2 years. There is technologies within this frame that are available right now where your return on investment could be under 1 year. So I would highly recommend, and the big takeaway from that is, don't be afraid of automation, try and adopt it. Don't be afraid of technology, try and adopt it, because you are going to see that ROI. Of course, you got to pull up your Excel spreadsheet and run some numbers, but make sure you do that. Of course, a little late for this year to do anything of that nature, but start thinking about it as you see the volumes this year, because prediction says, all things being equal, we are going to take off in the next couple of years.
Awesome. Yeah, I was going to say, if your shipping software doesn't ask you about your last trailer pull and you ship past that last trailer pull, you are leaving a lot of money on the table. All right, Robert, let's bring you in and get your case study.
Yeah, we work with a lot of retailers, Justin, and one of them in particular, I'll kind of take us back 12 months, and we'll start with the ugly, and then we'll go to the good. The ugly was they put out an RFP. They invited the big two. They didn't invite anybody else. They got the bids back, and one bid was $3.5 million lower than the other on a $23 million spend. And they simply couldn't avail themselves of that contract because all the internal necessary changes for IT and other things and implementation and trying to get the labels printed, everything else just couldn't happen. So they decided to walk back to their incumbent carrier at a much higher rate and continue on. So, that was the bad. Well, they learned
they
a
left
little
$3.5 million
yes.
on the table.
Yes.
Wow.
And so they learned a little lesson. So they ramped up and they started to add. They have several carriers on now. And part of the example I gave earlier is that once, FedEx Ground Economy is $3.15 in November, they're able to move the volume now to another carrier. Now, they don't have a wide range of carriers, but it definitely mitigated a lot of the cost that, was going to be assessed if they did nothing. And so now, if they still were stuck with one carrier option, they would have been a 27% increase in the rates. And then the good now is that they've learned that lesson twice, and now they're looking at all of the other available carriers that are out there in the network now. You've got all these on-demand, or gig, whatever you want to call these drivers that are out there, Better Trucks, Jitsu, Uni. You even have companies, a company called Sendle, and Sendle will act, they'll act almost like a domestic freight forwarder and get your shipments. So by having, and again, talking what we talked about earlier, is by getting additional carriers that fit and make sense, you will have options in the future. And if I would have one takeaway out of all of this, is that if you don't have multi-carrier shipping software like ProShip or whatever, you have to have a multi-carrier capability, because you are not going to be able to control your cost per package if you do not.
Excellent. All right, Robert, I'm going to stick with you. We're into our last segment before final advice. What is yours and your company's basic predictions for the near future?
So I would say like three things that we're looking at right now. And the first thing is that private carriers will deliver more packages than the other carriers, UPS, FedEx, USPS combined. They will deliver more than half the packages by 2025. And what we're seeing is that, currently the domestic market is around 88 million in September packages a day. About 30% of that has already been absorbed by Amazon, being pulled out, being their own deliveries, being shipped through their DSPs, I'm sorry. And so all of that volume is gone away. You have Walmart Local, which is really starting to take off. And the CEO, Doug McMillon, said they delivered 4.4 billion units same or next day in the last 12 months. So you see that the retailers themselves are starting to have the delivery capability. So it's sucking that out of so by 2025, the private carriers, private delivery will be more than half the network. So the second thing is, in 2025, I'm going to predict that Amazon gets out of its own way in their for-hire service. They're shipping for other, non-Amazon shippers, and they've struggled. They had a release in the Wall Street Journal last November about how they were going to get into this business, and they caught themselves up with IT and PII and all these other things, and they just struggled to get to market. And I predict that in 2025, they not only will come to market with a much simpler approach, the customers and shippers will find it a much simpler approach. They're going to have freight and maybe some DAS and maybe some fuel, but they're not going to have, as you have in a FedEx 250 EDI, 2,000 charge codes. You're just simply not going to have it. So I think in 2025, you'll see Amazon get some traction in non-Amazon shippers. And then the last thing is, just like we talked about, all of those carriers like Better Trucks, Jitsu, Veho, Uni, they are different than, everybody's going to say, okay, well, Pitney Bowes tried it and they went out. No, because they're not using USPS for final mile. They're using low-cost alternative. And, I will stop my Amazon driver as an example of these, but they're delivering 250 packages on 160 stops in a day, and they're all 2-pound packages. So you are availing yourself, they are, of these low-cost delivery. And when UPS driver is the last contract, everybody heard the number, $170,000 for a year to drive a UPS truck, they're simply not going to be able to compete at the delivery cost that these other carriers are giving. So my third thing is that you will see those other carriers gain traction in 2025 as well.
Excellent. Thank you. Nanad, I'm going to pull you up real quick here as we're starting to run out of time.
Yeah, I'll do a quick one. I'll agree with a lot of the things that Robert said, expecting going into next year. Specifically on the carrier side of the equation, I think we got to keep an eye on some of the trends driven through Shein and Temu. I already spoke about and what it does to the carrier delivery side of the universe, right? So, a lot of the companies that were mentioned, Uni and Jitsu, and these companies are actually focused on delivering for these brands. And as the volumes increase for them, don't expect that to actually go down. There's going to be more options out in the market, and to the point that we are making, it's going to be cheaper options, that are going to be available, and there's going to be some, calculations to be done on that front. I think, just to keep it super short, I'll say, and I've touched on the AI side, I think we are just scratching the surface. 2025 is going to be a very significant year on that front as far as how consumers purchase, how we ship stuff, how all the decisions are made as far as supply chain optimization is concerned. And you are going to start seeing a lot of changes, dynamic changes out in the market coming from that. Specifically, watch for the word agentic AI. I think that is where things are starting to go. It goes beyond what we know as ChatGPT. It starts moving into a lot of personalization. And that personalization, be aware, moves into potentially getting into replacing some of our jobs as well. So start looking into that aspect of things. I think it's really important. Evangelize that as much as possible, because I feel like most people aren't watching that as closely as they should.
Excellent. And Alex?
Well, I'm going to go a little further out than 2025. If we look at the delivery, last mile being the most inefficient piece of that delivery chain, absorbing more than 50% of the total costs, we are going to see some changes that. I think the US is definitely lacking behind Europe with their smart hubs, smart lockers, Pudo network. I think we're going to see more of that coming in. I mean, I know everybody's going to say, Alex, 80% of Americans expect a home delivery, 67% select a home delivery, but delivery costs will continue to escalate. And I think for merchants to stay competitive, for consumers to keep, their delivery costs down, I think you're going to see more alternate deliveries coming into play. And this is where technology comes into play again. Carriers need to invest in the technologies, and then merchants need to have the technologies to be able to take advantage of these alternate delivery locations that will be coming on.
Excellent. Excellent. Lots of interesting items there. I'm hopeful for Amazon, but you know what? I think Amazon needs to throw some people at the problem if we're ever going to get where Robert wants there. But with that being said, Alex, let's stay with you. If you've got one last piece of advice for our audience, what would it be?
Know your data inside and out. Know your package mix. Know your carrier mix. Don't wait till January to see what happened in 2024. You need to have real-time data. You need to make, the annual decision making. That just doesn't work anymore. You really need to be looking to make decisions quarterly, monthly, weekly, and be on top of your business so that you just stay ahead of the game.
Excellent. Thank you. Robert, what's your final advice for our audience?
The final advice is go make sure if you don't have multi-carrier shipping software, you must get it. You don't wait 3 years now. The contracts, typically you negotiate a contract 3 years later, they came back and talked to you. You got to be constantly negotiating because rates are changing all the time. New carriers and new services are coming in. And then you have to be able to use multi-carrier shipping software to be able to get that done.
And a nod.
I'll keep it simple as well. We've had some rough few years in the past at this point. I think we are back to normal. at this point. For some people, it might not seem like that. But going forward, if you were holding back on investments on your technology side or on the front of options, I think 2025 is getting set up as a good year in front of us. Plan ahead, plan early, start making those investment decisions. Of course, you can hold off to Q1, maybe a little bit into Q2, but you do need to deploy some of that capital to start seeing that return on investment, because the pressures are from every business going to be on, that supply chain margins.
Excellent. After hearing all three of you, I'm reminded of the switch in the warehouses from wave picking to continuous picking, right? And it's almost like we now have to push that concept up into the business. Rather than yearly wave decisions, we're going to have continuous decisions to keep up, continuous minor changes rather than a big annual change every year. So
hey, Justin, to that, I just have to say, for someone that was involved in one of the first waveless systems in North America and deploying that outside of Amazon, on the flip side, I'll also say this, right? Like making sure that when you build waveless, also plan for the days when you are actually, you do require some true optimization from labor planning. So have the optionality to be able to switch back and forth between saying, hey, I need to make that decision and be super rapid, last point of decision making dynamically. But hey, during slow times, let me show some resiliency in my business to be able to do that broader planning and be able to execute.
Nice. All right, this has been a great panel today. We've got some time here to go over some Q&A. The first one here is from Timothy from Cree Lighting. I think this one goes to me. How can you divert packages away from UPS if your agreement says you cannot move volume? I'm going to start with this one, and then I think I'll throw it over to Alex. But the thing that I would say is that there are technologies, we refer to it from the ProShip side as carrier volume balancing, where you can still rate shop within a carrier. If you are meeting your 52-week, 13-week, whatever your average is, at that point in time, you can go outside and include a lot of the, whether it's the second national carrier, whether it's the micro regionals and hyper regionals that Robert was talking about, these newer, more flexible carriers. So you may not be able to do it with 100% of your volume, but just like Robert was talking about with the ability to switch away from the ground advantage when there was a peak surcharge associated with it, you want to be able to, with a lot of that volume, be able to take advantage of that where you will. Alex, did you have more to add to that from a negotiation standpoint?
Well, yeah, I mean, absolutely. Carrier balancing is key. But, one of the things that if we look at, the ProShip report, only 15% of the respondents said they ship out of one DC. The majority of them are shipping out of multiple DCs. They're adding micro fulfillment station locations. So what really customers, the merchants are doing is they're getting the product closer to the consumer. And they're able to mitigate some of these fees that are going around. And the last thing I would say, never tie yourself into an agreement that ties your hands into a situation where it puts you and your customers in a negative.
Awesome. All right. Next question is from Dan from Land's End. How do you see the change of USPS injection points, DDO, DDU, for large carriers impacting services to customers? I'll put that out to the team here because I'm not qualified when it comes to postal. Go ahead, Robert.
Just in my background, I mentioned I worked for Emory Worldwide Airlines as part of the Priority Mail contract. I was an operations manager. We had 1,567 zip codes in one building, which we delivered overnight to. From that building, we were Western Pennsylvania and Northern West Virginia. I think that the concept that they have is right.
Oh, I think we just lost Robert.
using that concept now to bring everything back to that facility, making sure they're having full trucks and being able to deliver next. I don't think it's going to impact service negatively because, it's just taking it to a level where they can still deliver next day from that regional facility and have more consolidation and better line haul. That service-wise, if you got 0.2 days differential, I'd be surprised.
If I may jump in on that one particularly as well, to the points that Robert made, right? Based on all the conversations I've had so far, first of all, definitely it was kind of overdue and everyone kind of saw it coming as well, right? Like this shouldn't be a surprise, right? Like, it's been, the Postal Service has been funded through, taxpayer dollars at this point, and it's got to turn itself into a little bit of a profit center, if not actually become a little bit of a net neutral. On the other side, yeah, not doing a DDU injection is going to increase the cost from a shipment standpoint, to an estimate rather than $1, it's going to go to $3.50, right? So there is definitely cost pressures building up on that side. But what it also gives is an opportunity for private carriers to now start bringing more options, right, on what they can do. So some of the services that we mentioned now start becoming more premium as a utilization. Through pandemic, we have seen a lot of these local couriers, and they, a lot of them have disappeared as well post-pandemic, right? And utilization of that. So you're going to start seeing very dynamic change in the market. We have started seeing some of these carriers building sort centers are now stopping their infrastructure deployment. So you're starting the pullback on that front. So I would definitely see a cost implication in the short run, but that also, every time a cost implication happens, there is opportunity for innovations. And I think a lot of innovative players are starting to do a lot of innovative things around that. It's just an end of an era. I think it's overdue. But the story is not yet done because there is, Smart Post, again, they are, decommissioning that. But on the flip side, there is things on the UPS side where they have a certain equation going on with the post office. What's the impact of all of that? So I think it's worth watching, but slowly all of this unravels.
Interesting. All right, next question, and I'm going to rapid fire these a little bit more now. How can I balance data-driven planning with the flexibility to quickly adapt when unexpected logistical challenges arise?
I would say that you have to have reporting that you're doing continuously. You have to have heat maps to see where you're having issues, whether or not it's from, and then you have to have milestone reporting as well. When does the order come in? When does it get fulfilled? When is the first carrier scan? Is there an exception scan on that package? When is it out for delivery and when is it delivered? So you need to start measuring all those little segments, and you need to make sure that you see it when it's changing and happening and going the wrong way. And then you have to identify what part of that chain is being broken, and then you have to fix it.
And Robert, I'm going to add to that, and I'm going to pick up something that Nod was talking about, especially with AI going forward. The way AI is going to affect is either somebody is going to have to make a change to the shipping software, the WMS software, the OMS software, et cetera, in order to advertise these changes, or you need software components that are capable of being communicated with via API, such that once you agree with that AI, it can propagate out that information. Okay. So as you start to build your stack needs to be able to be more easily controlled by humans and potentially in the future by other software. All right.
Justin, what I would also add to that, and this is where looking at the features of the software is really critical, because you can't just go with the minimum piece of software. You want to have software that has the features that if a need arises, you're able to either turn on those features, or those features are already there to alert you to these changes so that you're sort of staying a step ahead of the game. Because like Robert mentioned earlier, here's a client that wouldn't make a change over a $3.5 million savings. Well, when you are making that changes, get the software that is feature rich, so you can turn it on as you need those extra features, with changes coming on board.
Excellent. All right, and with that, we are at time. We had a couple of questions left, but we're just going to go ahead and call it. We know this pros who knows there's a lot of sessions going on. Thank you. I'd like to thank my panelists with me, Alex, Robert, and Nod. Please find them on LinkedIn. Find their stuff. They've got great stuff. We've tried to pull some of the best panelists in the market on this. Nod and I eventually are probably going to have to do an AI conversation because I think it's going to be very interesting and very exciting. But with that, let's go ahead and close it. And I want to thank you all for joining today. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, guys.